Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. I'm KP, Nick is here in attendance with me, as usual, because today we're going to be going through Monday Night Raw. This took place 2 nights ago as of recording, the 17th of March, and this was scheduled to be a pretty big show for a number of reasons. Let's break everything down that took place, and let's get into all of the analysis. So, beginning with the start of the night, we would have a sort of a face-off in the end. But first of all, we would be greeted by John Cena, his first public appearance in a WWE capacity since the events of Elimination Chamber. We have been waiting to hear from him for a number of weeks regarding what took place and where his mindset is now, where his head's at. John Cena would take to the mic eventually. There would be a little bit of foreplay, I suppose, at the start with the crowd, which was a very raucous, loud, energetic Belgium crowd. They were absolutely fantastic throughout the whole night, and they completely killed it to begin with here, bringing the heat, bringing the fire towards John Cena. There are very various amounts of crowd chants here towards him, both love and hate, mostly hate, I think in this case. But Cena would speak basically for the first time since the Elimination Chamber. He would compare the crowd and the fans, WWE Universe, all that generosity, to that of a toxic relationship. He would say that he spent the last 25 years, and the crowd, the audience, the fans, they've only spent that time taking from him. He'd go on to mention how whatever he gave was never enough, like whether it was in his early career, going into when he just kept on winning to proving how good he really was, to then, me being maybe more generous in the later stages of his career. But he would always go back to saying, after he would allude over those particular parts of his career, that whatever he did during those stints was never enough. It was a very, very personal sounding promo, sort of like almost like he'd been bottling it up for a long time, and he just was allowed this moment just to completely release everything that he'd been hiding for such a long period. Obviously, his career spans over 20, around 25 years or so. So it has been a lot, that he's gone through in that time. But it wouldn't quite end there, because he'd even go on to say things like the crowd has only ever given him their worst. Whether you agree or you disagree with that, that's completely fair, up to you. But someone who definitely doesn't agree with that was Cody Rhodes, John Cena's opponent for WrestleMania coming up soon. He would come down to the ring, interrupting John Cena, and he would basically call Cena out on what he would believe to be nonsense. He'd basically tell John Cena that the fans have not given them his worst. They may have done in part, but they have also given him their best throughout a long period of time over those 20+ years. He would tell, there would be a part where I think John Cena would very quietly sort of say, "Not now, kid," or something along those lines. Cody would basically just assertively say, "Don't address me as kid. Talk to me, speak to me as the WWE champion. That's who I am." But then Cody would basically demand that he gets the proper John Cena going into WrestleMania. He basically just slandered John, basically saying, whoever this version is, this isn't the Cena that I want at WrestleMania. I want the actual John Cena, the hustle, the loyalty, respect, the one that's on the front of your t-shirt. I want that John Cena, not whoever this is standing right in front of me right now, because this isn't the guy. It was a very sort of like heated segment between the two men. No fists were thrown, no aggression in terms of fighting, they're squaring up to one another, but it was very much a battle of words here. It was interesting that when Cody came down to the ring, John Cena didn't say anything really, vocally, from then on. So I think maybe they're trying to sort of like elongate this throughout the next few weeks. Maybe they'll have a little bit of back and forth going forward. Maybe get a little bit more confrontation within the ropes, between the two men. And I think this is sort of like a nice little setup for the weeks to come, because they're going to be on the next Raw as well in Glasgow, Scotland. So that'll be interesting to see where they take this from there. But this was a pretty nice way to kick things off here. Cena did a very, very good promo. He's always won with the mic. He's always very, very good in that respect. And this was absolutely no different. It's still weird seeing John Cena in this type of situation, being a heel. He said he's not a heel. He said he's not a face. He's just a human. But I think we can all basically agree he is a heel in this case. But that wouldn't be all of the moments of the night, because then we go into all the action. In ring, we would get Penta go 1-on-1 with Ludwig Kaiser, our opening matchup of the night. That'll be a no disqualification match. Penta has been on a roll, let's put it that way, right? Recently, he's been killing it. Ever since he came into WWE, he would dispatch of Ludwig Kaiser in a pretty fun match. Ludwig getting moments to sort of like dominate in parts, as he does, being the aggressor. But Penta, dragging his feet maybe a little bit towards the middle of the matchup, bringing it back towards the end and hitting a lovely Canadian destroyer onto a steel chair. And then the Penta driver for the win to pick up over Ludwig Kaiser. Once the matchup had ended, Kathy Kelly would come on down to the ring, as she's been doing, variously throughout matches on Raw recently, and she conducted a little mini interview. Penta would basically go on to say, after being asked by Kelly what is next, that he wants the Intercontinental Championship. So maybe a little bit more to come on that front later on in the night. But interesting to see that Penta is now looking for championship gold already in WWE. So next up then, guys, we will go into our next contest of the night, which would be a 1-on-1 matchup with Ivy Nile and Dakota Kai. This would be a quite simplistic matchup here between the two women, which mainly focused more on stuff on the outside. So between the two women in the ring, this obviously been regarding the Women's Intercontinental Championship recently. Lara Valkyria beating both women in recent history to defend them off and to stay as the Women's Intercontinental Champion. But this would be a match between the two of them. I guess you could say these two contenders, really. Just between the two of them, and just basically to go from there. The match would go pretty fine, pretty decently enough throughout the majority of the contest. We'd have the Creed brothers, American-made partners of Ivy Nile, on the outside, accompanying Ivy for this matchup, as well as Chad Gable. Eventually, we would get the LWO come down, Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee. They would basically just fend off the three other guys at ringside, so Chad, Brutus, and Julius. They would take them down. They would eventually see off Chad Gable. They'd have a little bit of cat and mouse in the crowd, running off, chasing him into throughout the arena, and they would be gone. As to what happened to the Creed brothers, they were taken out. It's all like a bit of a melee before chasing off Chad Gable, and that would render them basically done. Ivy now distracted. Dakota Kai would hit a big boot into the corner, and then she would follow up with the victory, hitting the GTK to get the 1-2-3 on Ivy Nile. And it was it's a pretty decent matchup. Not really a lot to say about this one, but there was a whole lot going on the outside with LWO and American Made. Then, following up from that one, we keep in with the women's division. We would go over to Io Sky, and she would be in the ring doing a contract signing with Bianca Belair ahead of their match at WrestleMania. So, Io, the brand new Women's World Champion, defending against Bianca Belair, the Elimination Chamber winner. The contract signing was quite interesting, because you basically had Io Sky demanding more respect from Bianca. I think I mentioned that sort of like last week. It looked like Io wanted more respect when they had that sort of like interaction in the ring with Ripley and Belair. And it definitely seemed to sort of like cross paths into this week, where that situation was made completely alight, where Io physically demanded more respect. She is the Women's World Champion, and she deserves more. Bianca would go on to say that she actually does respect Io, but she's going to give her a pass after Io had hit her last week, and she doesn't allow that to happen if she can help it, but because technically it was her fault, she'd allow that to, as a pass. Quite interesting, a little bit of mutual respect there from from Bianca Belair. But also maybe a little bit of aggressiveness, sort of like hidden deep down or wanting to maybe come out. The two would sign the contract, and it would seemingly be a flawless contract signing. But in WWE, that doesn't happen. You can't have a flawless signing because down would come Rhea Ripley, the third person that's involved in this little interaction here between the women going into WrestleMania, and Ripley clearly still frustrated regarding the events that took place in the last couple of weeks. Her losing her championship, her maybe being disrespected by Io Sky and Bianca Belair last week, yada yada yada. She's still not happy. The three were getting each other's faces in the ring before we see a very similar situation to what we saw last week, where we sort of see Bianca shoving Io in the face, and then all hell breaks loose. Ripley ends up being the woman on top at the end of the segment, because she would slam Io Sky onto Bianca Belair through the table that they did the contract signing with, and then Ripley would also sign the contract before walking off with it, essentially saying that she's going to be at the match as well. I think a lot of people want to see that triple threat contest take place, and it looks like that's going to be the direction we're going in. But regarding these 4 segments then, Nick, what did you think of everything that took place here? How good did you think that John Cena heel segment was at the start of the show, with bringing Cody Rhodes into play? Building that up going into WrestleMania. Penta again proving that he's just rolling with WWE at the moment. He's doing great. Dakota and Ivy, their matchup, the former Intercontinental Championship challengers, and then obviously that contract signing. Big things happening to be on the show.
Yeah, the John Cena promo, and we were all waiting for, and it was interesting. I found it interesting the angle he went in terms of blurring the line between a babyface and a heel, saying he's in an abusive relationship and he's breaking up with us. I liked that part, but yeah, very much playing the victim here, and I think that's an interesting angle to go with. As Cody dubbed him a whiny bitch, I think John's angle here as a heel is to more so get us on Cody's side. It's kind of what I feel like here. I imagine after the Mania match and Cena either moves on or whatnot, I think we'll get a more vicious version of Cena. At least I'm hoping. But again, it's tough to judge off just one promo. But I did feel like this one didn't quite live up to what I thought. Maybe it's just because of how long it's been, and we had to wait to get this promo. But yeah, both getting huge reactions from the crowd, and a shout out for the Belgium crowd. Mentioned will probably be mentioned every show until we get down to the European tour. They just make everything better, and USA should take some notes from these crowds. But yeah, I think this lasted like a good 30 minutes, and John got, I think, 5 minutes worth of booze before he even picked up the mic. I didn't feel like he was going to walk out and that sort of thing. So, yeah, Cody getting a huge reaction as well, and yeah, I think this is a good first interaction. I'm curious to see where they go from here. If John kind of continues to play this victim card, which again is an interesting angle. And John's heel face needs a little bit of work. I think I've mentioned that before, but it almost appears a little sad, not so much a heel. So regardless of what he tells us, he is a heel. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see where they go from here. But yeah, John didn't get too much interaction here, I think, as you noted as well. And Cody's certainly getting that full-on babyface. Probably the best babyface he's gotten since Mania of last year. So good to see that at least. Ludwig versus Penta. Yeah, I think this one was kind of setting even, or at least that's kind of how they were portraying it. And Ludwig getting the loss here, and I think was the end of this, with Penta getting the win, announcing he's going after the IC title, and then appearing later on in a similar situation with Braun Breaker. So I think this is the end of that feud, unless Ludwig somehow finds a way to get in that scene as well. But yeah, Penta getting the win here, and it was a decent enough match. I think I kind of expected a little more with the two of them involved. And I felt like with the match being a no holds bar, I felt like they didn't utilize it as much as they could have, if as much as they've been building this up between the two, and these two genuinely not liking each other. Well, Ludwig not liking Penta feels like more so the case. But besides the chair spots, which were used at the end, didn't feel like there was a ton of utilization of that match type. So, but yeah, good to see the Penta get the win here, and excited to see what he can do in the IC scene. Dakota Kyle versus Ivy Nile. Yeah, both women looked good in the match, but yeah, as you mentioned, this was much more about the shenanigans outside of the ring, which I thought maybe a little unnecessary, being the fact that they were going to have a match later on anyways. But good to see Kai pick up a win here. Yeah, and like I said, both women looked good there, so a decent enough match, I suppose. And Io and Bianca signing their contract. As you mentioned, contract signings never tend to go well, and I think their interaction in the ring before Rhea got there was fine. And then Rhea coming in to sign the contract and attempt to put both of them through the table. I believe that was supposed to be the spot. Didn't quite work out, but regardless, Rhea intervening, I think we all expected, but her to just sign the contract and walk away and have Adam Pearce chasing him down is such a ridiculous scene. But interesting that that's the angle they're going with to get her in there. I think we all kind of expected her to be in it. But then Io looking like a child between these two, being Bianca and Rhea, is another interesting angle to take. And I guess Rhea is going to say, because I signed it, I'm in the match. Interesting that she wouldn't, try a different angle to get in. Say, well, she cost me, that's all she had to do was say that to Pierce. And I felt like that probably would have got further. But instead, we're just going to sign it and play keep away with the general manager. Interesting angles for sure. But yeah, all of these building up, continuing their build to our Mania scene. And Penta moving on, I think, is my key takeaways here from this first half of Raw.
Adam Pearce looking like a useless stooge? Nah, can't be him. Never. That's so out of character for him. Yeah, I think when we look back on Rhea Ripley's entrance into the matchup, it's going to be quite an interesting one. If this really is all they're going to be doing for it, and then next week they're just going to be like, yeah, her name's on the legal documents, and technically she's in. I don't know how I really feel about that. It's a bit, like you said, it is a strange way to get in, but I don't know. Maybe it's going to work out in the end. Maybe they put a little twist on it, but I'm not too sure. At the moment, it does seem like that's the way forward, and it's a bit of a weird angle to take. But yeah, we'll see. We'll let them go with the flow, and then we'll go with that. Maybe they change things up a little bit more. We'll see. Going into what would take place next, then, guys, and blink or you'll miss this one, because we had a one-on-one match between Jey Uso and Austin Theory, and it probably took me longer to read that out than the actual how long this match took. It was a pretty quick one. I think by the time the match had started, it was basically over. Jey hits one of the worst spears we'll ever see, and would get the victory over Austin Theory because of that reason. After that, we'd have Gunther come on down, attacking Jey Uso. But this time, a very interesting twist, instead of Gunther successfully putting him to sleep, Jey would counter it and would actually fend off Gunther to hold the World Heavyweight Championship to end the segment. There's not really an awful lot to say. Like, my hatred for Jey Uso doesn't really apply here, because I just can't really go into that much detail. It was very quick, the match. I think we're literally talking like 2 or 3 moves, that's it. The finish was botched, and then they had the really amazing twist at the end with Gunther somehow not putting him to sleep and actually having the babyface do a little bit of good work here to build that rivalry up a little bit more equally going into WrestleMania. So this was a step in the right direction, I think, personally, from booking that story. It's good to see Jey actually getting some fight back against Gunther, and I think the next few weeks will be interesting to see what they sort of do with the dynamic of this build, whether they sort of like allow Jey to get a bit more momentum as we creep towards WrestleMania, or if they switch things quickly back to Gunther being in control, and then we go from there. But yeah, not an awful lot to say because it was so fast, the segment. We would then go on to our next contest, which would, like you said, Nick, a few moments ago, we would have the LWO versus American Made, the Creed brothers, which would essentially follow up from the shenanigans earlier on in the night that we saw in Dakota Kai and Ivy Nara's match. This one would be a relatively quick match as well, if I remember it. Not as quick as the previous one that I was mentioning, but this one didn't go too long, I think. The original segment of the night, the opening segment, that was quite long. Maybe this one got time cut a little bit because of that. I'm not too sure. But either way, regardless, LWO picking up the win here over the Creeds. We would see the mystery masked man attacking the LWO post-match. Whether that's Chad Gable or not, the jury's still out on that one. But I'm just going to refer to him as a mystery masked man for now. He looks and sounds like Gable, but I don't know. I'm not too sure. But yeah, no, it's just building this sort of like situation up between Chad Gable and the Luchas of the WWE, and it seems to be quite an interesting angle they're doing this by essentially making the rest of America made. I don't know, just like little whipping boys in this particular story at the moment. But I think the Creeds probably deserve a little bit better than what they've done. What they were allowed to do in this matchup, but I guess a win for Ray and Dragon Lee is pretty great for them. So I guess that's positive in that direction. Regarding what would take place next, we would have Seth Rollins take to the ring. He would cut a promo talking about last week's main event of Raw. Obviously, everything that happened in that steel cage between himself, CM Punk, and then Roman Reigns at the very end. He would talk about Roman and how he basically came back to get revenge. Seth would say that he would have done the same thing, so he can't really be too mad about the actions of Roman Reigns. And he sort of expects that from somebody that he knows so well throughout his career. He would go on to talk about CM Punk as well. He wouldn't just focus on Roman Reigns. He would say that Punk is lucky that Roman stepped in, because if Roman hadn't, Rollins was about to end CM Punk's career, and he would have just stomped him into the mat. Who knows what he would have done from there on out. Obviously, Steel Cage main event, anything goes in that sort of situation. Yeah, I would imagine Seth is speaking the truth here, and he would have literally just wanted to try his hardest to end Punk's career there and then. The segment would end by Seth saying that he'll be headed to SmackDown because Roman and CM Punk will be there live in Italy, Bologna, this Friday. So Seth's going to go and join them because let's spread the invitations across to Rollins as well. So setting up a little segment there between the three men for this Friday. Looking forward to seeing what takes place in that, because obviously that's very heated between the three men. And then we would go into our main event. We would have the Intercontinental Championship being defended by Bron Breakker, and he would put it on the line against Finn Balor of the Judgment Day. It would be, in the end, Bron Breakker picking up the win here. No shocking title change at the end of a show for the first time in a little while, I guess. And yeah, Breakker would defeat Finn. We'd have Dom Mysterio and Carlito. They would come down to interfere in the matchup. At first, it seems to be working out pretty well for them. But eventually, they would maybe get a little bit too handsy, and Dom Mysterio, he would look to basically try and knock down Bron Breakker from the second rope. Finn Balor was up on the top, and as Bron fell, so did Finn. He would fall down, and his lower parts would basically just land on top of on the top turnbuckle. Dom, mistakenly basically costing Finn there, and it wouldn't be long afterwards where we'd see Bron Breakker hit a Frankensteiner and then go for a spear and retain his Intercontinental Championship. So there's been a little bit of weirdness between the Judgment Day recently. Earlier in the night, we'd actually have a segment between Dom and the rest of Judgment Day, but mostly with Dom and Finn, about how he reckons that Penta should be involved and should be the new member of Judgment Day. Finn would basically laugh at him, saying, really, you've had all this time, you've spoken to so many people, you've gone behind my back to try and recruit somebody, even though I don't want anybody new, and now you say Penta, who literally earlier in the night has said that he wants the Intercontinental Championship. You really think that's a good idea? So there's definitely some, I don't know, confusion between Finn and Dom. Definitely sort of miscommunication there between the two guys, and there's faction disarray here between Judgment Day. Obviously, the end of the match would prove that as well, between the the late stages there, where Dom would obviously end up costing Finn the championship. After the matchup, JD or Judgment Day, they would head into the ring. Dom and Carlito, they would basically try and beat down Bron Breakker. It wouldn't be too long before Penta would charge down to the ring, and he would basically even the odds, closing out the show. So, yeah, no shocking title change. Bron Breakker winning, which was, I think, the right call, definitely. He looks to head into WrestleMania now, possibly 1-on-1 against Penta. Obviously, a lot can change in that time, but definitely keen to see what Penta can bring to the IC title picture, like you mentioned earlier, Nick. But what did you think about the main event in terms of the Intercontinental Championship match? Seth Rollins, he's headed to SmackDown, so that should be quite interesting between those three. Jay's very quick match and segment afterwards, and then the LWO picking up a win over American Made. What did you think?
So yeah, I know you're not a big Jay fan, and so and because of the lack of action, didn't have a ton to say about that. But allow me, because this match lasting under 1 minute, And with the yeeting that took place before the match, I think took place for usually about 5. I didn't clock that one in, but regardless, you see where I'm going here. Um, the spear, which was botched, by the way, to end the match, and then poor Austin Theory having to take the pin after that. This didn't help anyone. And then after the match, Jay attempting a suicide dive on A Town Down Under, hit the ropes really hard, and then subsequently, I believe he landed like on his middle back slash butt, on the outside of the ring apron, which, as we know, is the hardest spot of the ring. Um, I think I think maybe it's the schedule for Jay. Obviously he's being utilized more than he ever has before, and they're over in Europe and you're going nonstop. So I like to think maybe that plays a part in it. But everyone else is going through the same thing, right? So I'm just trying to attempt to find a reason why he botched 2 things within a couple of minutes. Maybe he spent too much energy on the eating, perhaps. Regardless, Gunther comes in, as you mentioned, and somehow doesn't end up standing tall again. And not only that, Jay rips the title from his waist. Gunther leaves the ring for some reason. I guess he didn't. I'm not sure why. But anyways, Jay throws the title at him, and I believe Gunther was supposed to catch it, but he doesn't, and the belt ends up on the floor. Um, I mean, not to sound like an old school fan or anything, but that seems kind of disrespectful to the title, especially as how hard they worked to make that title seem relevant back when they took it off Roman. Um, so yeah, Jay literally threw it on the floor. So some issues with this segment, I guess you could say. No one comes out here looking good. I think Jay was supposed to, but obviously that didn't work out. And poor Austin Theory, who was once appeared to be, Vince's golden child, whether you agreed with how he did it or not, I think he certainly has, you know, things and qualities that would feel appropriate to have him as the number one guy. Should it had happened the way it happened? No, but now he's in what appears to be a dead team because they were made to look silly back-to-back weeks. Waller not as quickly as Theory, but he was there in the sidelines the whole time and didn't make any difference. So just a terrible, just a terrible segment. I don't think there's really any getting around that. Hopefully, Gunther comes back in and takes back dominance next week because whatever this was didn't quite work. Creed versus LWO. Yeah, again, the match was good for what it was, I guess. It is weird that it was so short, especially since they took away a majority of the time which was already limited from Ivy Nile and Dakota Kai earlier in the match. And you raised a good point about maybe time being cut short. Granted, the opening promo was 30 minutes. Was it supposed to be that long? I don't know. But it didn't feel long. It didn't feel long in the moment. But you had the Ivy Nile Dakota Kai match that felt really short. You had this match that felt really short. And then you had the the Jey Uso Austin Theory, which felt really short. So something clearly wasn't, I don't know if maybe the time in the arenas in these European on these European tour shows are supposed to get closer to that 2 hour mark, because this one again was, and prior to the last 2 weeks, it was very much felt like they had as much time as they needed. So possibly that's an issue here, but yeah, then to go on to the Seth Rollins promo, which in my opinion felt kind of redundant and useless. I guess the point of him promoting the interactions on SmackDown, but of course the crowd didn't like that because that meant they weren't getting to see Roman or Punk. So why bother with that? I think is kind of my opinion. Give the other matches a little more time, but yeah, I guess they're worried we're gonna forget about it, or they're thinking that maybe people in Brussels will be able to attend the show at SmackDown. I don't know what their angle was, but I felt like that was kind of just the overall show vibe was just some odd things going on. But then yeah, the Rollins Balor, by far the best match of the night. Didn't have a ton of competition though, and of course Judgment Day members get involved. Um, but yeah, not enough to take down Braun Breaker, as you mentioned. They had a trend here, right? We had a main event, a title match where we're gonna have it, where we're gonna have them change yet another title, or where we're finally gonna stop that trend. And I think stopping it and allowing Breaker to finish, or excuse me, retain was the right move. Him and Balor, I would love to see that match get a good 15 minutes or so. They both killed it in the little time and the time they had. Um, yeah, with the Judgment Day coming in and then trying to take down Breaker after the match, and Penta intervening, and them two going face to face. I think to this point it's been a little unclear exactly what they were going to do with that title picture. But seeing them face to face with Breaker holding up the title felt monumental in terms of what we could potentially get. Again, as you mentioned, I don't know if it's the only person that will be challenging for it, but as of now, I don't think anyone would complain about that. So yeah, that was Raw. I think it's safe to say, and feel free to disagree, but this was definitely the worst Raw we've had in a while. And I even go so far as to say, at least that I can recall, this is probably the worst Raw that we've had since the debut on Netflix. And possibly I'm just overreacting because it's still fresh, but there's some weird moves here, and yeah, it just felt odd. The timing, the structure of the whole card just fell off. So again, it just the beginning and the end I think saved it, but everything in between it just didn't gel well for me. So yeah, I give this Raw I think a 6 out of 10, and I feel like that's being generous. But again, I think the beginning and the end kind of saved it. Everything in between just felt odd. So yeah, that's that. What did you think of Raw, KP? Am I overreacting a bit? Did you enjoy this one a little more? And yeah, hopefully we can get back on the right track come next week for Raw.
I wouldn't say you're overreacting. I wouldn't say that's like outside of the realms of possibility there. I think when it comes to the recent shows, we have been hitting the heights of some really top tier shows. And I think going into this one, as a general, as an overall across the show, I think it is a little bit of a downfall compared to those recent ones. I think if you're going to have a segment at the start of the show with John Cena, making such a tremendous sort of like step forward in this whole story to WrestleMania, obviously, the first time he's been seen since then in a WWE capacity, being like half hour plus, I think you're gonna have to have some way to extend the show. Like, I think when I went to watch it last night, because I watched it quite late in the end, the recording for me was 1 hour 47 minutes. And if you're using like half an hour, like 35 minutes of that roughly of like just the one segment, you're only leaving like an hour and 10 minutes across. Like, you're talking like another 7 segments here that we're speaking about, plus interactions backstage and stuff. There's not a lot of time. So I felt like they had to at least go like 2.5 hours or so really for this sort of show, just to try and sort of like make these other matches seem a little bit better than what they were. Because I don't know if the plan was to squash Theory so quickly with Jay. It might have been, which in that case, then yeah, he did. But it's just a shame that everything else sort of went wrong during it. And then yeah, the LWO and the Creeds, I think that could have had a lot more time gone into it as well. And I know you mentioned about Braun Breaker and Finn Balor. They could have had like 15, 20 minutes, whatever, just to completely go at it. Instead of maybe, I think they probably had about, just over 10 minutes, I would say, maybe regarding this one. Possibly maybe a little more. I didn't time it, but it didn't feel like quite as long as maybe we could have wanted to get. And I know you alluded to that. But yeah, I think maybe a little bit of dip in quality. throughout the entirety of the show, but I think they had some really good moments between that main event and the start, which is what I know I'm echoing yourself here, but I agree. So that's ultimately what it comes down to. I would give this one a 6.5 out of 10. I think there have been some shocking Raws since debut on. This is the debut on Netflix, and this is. I don't know if it's the worst for me, but it's amongst the worst. But yeah, I really hope that the European tour does get better because we got Glasgow next week for Raw. We got Bologna, Italy this Friday. We've got London, the O2 Arena. That's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So there are a lot of big events, big places that they're going to be going to with some loud crowds, and I'm hoping that the shows are going to sort of like follow up and follow suit with that. But yeah, I think when it comes to the build to WrestleMania, there's a lot to fit in. There's a long time to do it. They don't want to do too much too quickly. Maybe that's what we're getting here, and they're trying to sort of like drag things out. I'm not too sure. But regardless, hopefully next week will be better. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in into this episode of The Push with Nick and KP. We've just gone through our Raw recap for this past week. Let us know in the comments. What did you think? Did you think it was maybe a little bit of a drop in quality between last week and maybe the week before and this week? Maybe you disagree with things that we said. But yeah, let us know what you're thinking. If you like the video, please hit a like and subscribe to the channel. And yeah, keep up to date with future content coming out soon because we've got NXT recap coming up very soon as well. Thanks to everybody for tuning in to The Push with KP, and we'll see you next time.